Hello, and welcome to another episode of Open Studio. I'm your host, Martina Flor, and in this show, I have honest conversations with artists, designers, and creatives to uncover their story and the specific tactics they use to build a successful career around their skills and the work they love doing. In this podcast, I have interviewed dozens of accomplished artists and creatives to basically answer one valuable question. How did they get there where they are? Now, while we prepare for all the greatness that is coming on Season 3, I'm releasing this special recap episode which features some of the best moments of Season 2 in one place, so you can always dig deeper and go listen to one of these episodes. For the full list of guests featured today, see the episode description right below where you press play in your podcast app, or as usual, you can head to martinaflor.com/podcast and find all the details there. Please enjoy. Episode 34, Matteo Bologna, Fake It Until You Make It, The Bliss of Ignorance, What Makes a Bad Partner, and Staying Small to Maximize Profit. So you started, that was your first touch point in the working world as a creative, like doing illustrations, right? So what were the following steps? Because you run right now a successful branding agency, but I bet there were minor steps that you did before getting to that point where you decided to start an agency. So what were the experiences in design or art that made you say like, hey, this is my thing. This is something that I can imagine myself doing for a long time.
Yeah, I think when people looks at other people's life or people that they consider successful, they think, wow, they made it. And I don't know if I really made it. I think it's more like someone made you do it, something made you do it. There's a lot of things that, a lot of decisions in my life that I just had to make because something was presented to me. And I don't think I really arrived where I am by making decisions. And I'm sure I made a lot of decisions, but it's not like a big decision that helps to change something in a way that is drastic. Though I think maybe the biggest decision, if I have to look at my past, maybe I made two decisions that were key. The first one was to buy a Mac because I was starting, I bought it in a moment where I was transitioning from illustrations to graphic design. I didn't know much about graphic design. I started buying graphic design annuals at a bookstore, that all annuals that were coming from United States. This was before the internet. So it was before people in Italy were aware was happening in the rest of the world. By looking at design annuals, actually, it was kind of like having a very slow internet connection because by opening a design annual in 1885, you were looking at stuff that was that has been finished to produced probably in 1883 and then sent to the annual the award company, award institution who makes these books, like the Art Directors Club or the Type Directors Club. And then they would print it. It would take 1 year to be printed, and then they will reach Italy like 3 years ago after. So by the time the idea happened to the time that it reached my young mind of excited designer or aspiring designer, it took really probably 3 years. And so I started being in love with this graphic design thing, and I tried to do it in the traditional way with ink and rulers and French curves, and I really sucked at that. My mechanicals were terrible. They were all dirty, the smudges of ink everywhere. And then I started looking for, it was the moment where you could hear that there was this thing called desktop publishing. And so I bought a computer, which actually I didn't buy a computer, I leased a computer because it was costing, I think I paid the equivalent of like $700 a month for a computer. Like
What? That's a bunch of money, actually.
computer and a printer. It was crazy, crazy expensive. And so I was paying for my computer with the money that I was making with my illustration job.
So you were actually breaking even.
Yes. And thanks to my mother, who was very nice and still had me as her roommate in the apartment where I was sleeping, I was fed, and I actually was using one of the rooms as my office because we had this big apartment and one room was my office. So I had the office, sleeping quarters, and food. And so this was the first big decision, buying a computer. And then just because I had a computer, because the bar in Italy for graphic design was very low, for product design was very high, but graphic design, nobody, there were like bad teachers, it was really, really horrible, the graphic design world at the time. And automatically, because I had a computer, because the quality was bad in Italy, I could say to people, hey, I'm a graphic designer. And they would be like, he's a graphic designer. Yeah, he has a computer, of course. So I faked my profession. I pretended to be someone that I actually I wasn't, because I really sucked at graphic design. So what I was doing, I would copy the stuff that I was seeing in these annuals. And little by little, I became slightly better. Of course, I had terrible holes in my knowledge about graphic design because everything was learned by making things. And I made huge mistakes. Like, I designed a brochure for Apple Computer when I was like 26, and I felt like the coolest guy in the world. And for a trade show. And the guy from Apple called me after the trade show was finished a couple of months later and said, hey, Matteo, we need more brochures. Can you tell the printer can we order more? And I said, yes, I was so proud of myself. And then the guy, before hanging up, says, but Matteo, can you make sure that this time page 5 comes after page 4? And I was like, okay, I'll make sure that this happens. Thank you very much. Bye. And I was like, fuck, I'm such an idiot. I didn't even know how to proof before going on press. I was a total ignorant.
And I want to ask you, what were the first challenges that you faced when you moved to the US, considering that you were an Italian, not speaking the language, and you were a graphic designer, which probably opened a lot of doors for you, or actually made you, open the doors of a certain community for you. But what were the challenges for you when you first came to the US?
I think there were a lot of challenges. Now I'm thinking about it, I'm starting to laugh a little bit, because I was coming from Milan, which is it was a very small world, especially for in the graphic design world, where you could pick up a phone, call someone in the studio, and talk to the principal. And probably, actually, the principal would pick up the phone. You didn't even have to go through receptionists. And I remember that I would call studios like Milton Glaser, calling Milton Glaser, hello, may I speak with Milton? And they would be like, who's speaking? And I am Matteo Bologna. I want to speak with Milton, please. And they would, of course, be very nice and try to tell me to fuck off in a very nice way. And actually there was this thing that was very funny for me to think about it right now. There was this thing that was called the drop-off day. Mm-hmm. And they would tell me, our drop-off day is Monday in the afternoon. And I would be like, oh, thank you very much. I remember hanging up and then calling them back and say, excuse me, what is drop-off? Because I had no idea that there was this practice where all the designers who wanted to work for certain studios or magazines or agencies, they had to drop off their portfolio on Monday afternoon after 2 o'clock at the reception, and you would pick it up 2 or 3 days later or the day after the art director in that place would look at the portfolios. So every day, every week, these studios had the portfolio day where they would see portfolios from candidates and go through the portfolio and eventually hire or talk to these candidates to see if they were a good match for their firms. It was so weird. Definitely pre-internet.
So you sort of brought your the kind of mindset or the way that the things work back home into this new experience in the US, right? So you were just operating as if you were in Milan.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, I started to meet mostly with designers who also spoke Italian. So one of the first people that I met in New York was Louise Feely, who was my design idol. She still is my design idol. And she was super nice. And for me, it was like a great experience. I started learning about studios by meeting people who would speak Italian. So through Louise, I learned a lot of things about how to interview and doing things in New York. So yes, the challenges was language, which of course brought me to meet a lot of people who were aware of the Italian world, the Italian language, and then work permit. Actually, I realized later that was after a few weeks that was a challenge. Thankfully, I was able to work.
A little detail.
Yeah, it was a little detail. I didn't know you needed, because I went there. I was like, okay, let's just try and see what the fuck is gonna happen. And after a while, I was able to find someone a company who wanted to hire me and sponsor me. And so I got a visa, which was great.
And it's interesting because sometimes this attitude or this mindset of like, well, I'm just going there and see what, how it turns out, sometimes saves you from worrying about all of the things that you need to nail before doing something. Because if you would have known that up front, you may have not done it, like you may have said like, hey, it's better here home. Like I can find my way in my city. And sometimes not knowing the things that it involves doing something, sometimes it's helpful.
Ignorance was a bliss, I have to say, because I was really cocky in a certain way. I thought I was cool, and actually I was probably a shit designer. And but this ignorance really helped me a lot because I opened doors that I probably should not even have, I would have not considered to open if I knew what they were before. Fear would have would have stopped me to do certain things.
Episode 37 with Christina Amini. What makes a great book, the keys to collaborative work, getting a book published, and the future of content. Some publishers don't speak directly to authors. As you said, Chronicle Books does this, but many publishers like to speak with publishing agents, and they like to get proposals through them exclusively, and they don't get proposals from the general public. So what are the next steps once you discover or you identify who may publish your book? What are the next steps for someone that is, out of the blue, has a book idea and wants to make this happen?
Great question. Okay, so you have this great book idea. You've dug in, you've done some research, you've gone to bookstores, you've looked online, you've seen okay, there is a market for this book. I know there's an audience for it. And yet there's nothing that's quite like this book that I want to pitch. So then I would say that coming up with a really great proposal for your book is the next step. Now, different publishers, you can look on their websites and look at what they want in a proposal. And I would really pay attention to their submission guidelines. Or if it's that you're looking for an agent, that you pay attention to their submission guidelines. Because it's kind of one of those things, if you need to pay attention, you need to show that you've done your research, you need to show that okay, I read all the things that they asked me to submit, I'm submitting all of those things, and each publisher or each agent might be different. In general, some of the things that they will be looking for are a project synopsis, something about you. Who are you as an author? What expertise do you have? What education, connections, platform? What are the things that, if I'm promoting your book, what would be the things that I would say? One way I think a potential author too can think about it is that basically you want to give them as much material, hand it to them on a silver platter. Give them as much great information about you and about your project as you can, because then it's a person like me who then has to pitch it to their group. So make it easy for me. Break it down into bullet points. Make it really crisp and clear. Don't send me 45 pages that I need to work through, or just a website link. Oh, hey, check out my work. Because then you're asking me to do the work of, okay, I'm clicking on this link and then I'm trying to figure out what am I even looking for. That's not a book proposal. That's just sharing your website link. So you've written what your project is, who you are as an author. Write down who the market is. Who do you see as the audience for this book? Substantiate it with as much data as you can. Let's see here if there's any marketing and publicity hooks that you have, or contacts, connections that you have, places that you think would feature it. And then competition. This is really important. Publishers are always looking to what has been published and how has it done. So it's good to pull out, say, maybe 5 to 10 projects, books that are in the world that you consider your book to be similar to. You don't want to, hopefully your book is not the same as another book that you're pitching, but it's you ideally want there to show that there's a market for this kind of book that you're pitching, and yet you're offering something new to the conversation. So as I was saying before, publishers, they are taking some risk on every project that they publish, because they are putting in the money for the author. They're putting in a whole team's time. They're paying for paper printing and binding. And so they want to make sure that their investment in a project is going to pay off. So they want to make sure that that results in book sales. Like, okay, lots of people are going to buy this book, or enough people are going to buy this book that it's going to offset the amount that we had to pay for it. Let's see, is there anything else to include? I would just say, I mean, right now most submissions are digital because most people are working from home still. In some places, again, reading those submissions, do only accept paper submissions. So it's really paying attention, I think, to what it is that the publisher or agents are looking for.
And you mentioned a couple of times, you touched on platform, which, in a way, when you speak about doing the research and kind of understanding whether your book will sell or not, the platform you have may have a big impact, because you may be creating a book that is extremely niche. But if you have a platform of, 500,000 followers on social media and a subscribers list of, 100,000, then the things look different, right? Even if you're creating a book that is very niche, you may have a lot of, or a big audience to sell it to, right? So I want to ask you a little bit about this, because I was having a conversation with Malika Fav, which is an illustrator, a pretty accomplished illustrator, and she has a big social media following. And she was mentioning that nowadays, when she negotiates the terms with a publisher, she feels that through having a big social media following, she has a lot of leverage in terms of negotiating the terms and the essentially the royalties, because she is a big player, or she brings this book into a bigger audience, right? So I wanted to ask you a little bit about how have contracts changed and how have negotiations changed in this current scenario where authors nowadays may come to you with a big social media following. So the distribution is not falling only on the side of the publisher, but also on the side of the author.
Mm-hmm. So typically, publishing contracts work in that they are an advance against royalties. So the publisher gives the author, I'm just going to use round numbers to make it simple. Say we give an author an advance of $10,000 for a book with royalties of 5% of retail, and the book costs $20. So what is 5% of $20 is $1. Right? Did I get that right? And so for each book, you're earning that much money. The author is earning that much money, so that then after a certain number are sold, they earn back their initial advance. And just to be clear, though, the initial advance that an author receives, they never have to give that back. That is theirs for the keeping, whether they earn it in royalties or not. However, you usually, both the author and the publisher are more interested in the author earning the entire royalty, and so, because it means that then they've sold many more copies of the book. So in terms of how that changes the contracts, now with social media platforms being a key piece of publicity and marketing, it often means that if someone has a big social media platform, and if their book is targeting the thing that they're known for in that social platform, that then they can negotiate a higher advance and higher royalties. Why I made that point about the subject matter needs to line up with the thing that they're known for, because we've experienced too that it's not always the case that somebody who has a big social media platform, it doesn't necessarily mean it translates into every random hobby that they have. If they're known for design, then their project is mostly going to sell to that design audience, so basically giving the audience what they want. So that being said, with a bigger social media platform, it means, that they, like you were saying, that there is this room to negotiate. And sometimes too, there's many points in an author-publisher contract. Another point that they might negotiate is, how they sell their book. Maybe they sell the book on their website and they can get it at a deeper discount. Or maybe they want a bigger number of free copies. Or, there are many different things that authors can negotiate for, or agents can negotiate for on their behalf.
Episode 48 with EFDOT. How to land mural gigs, studying your business like a scientist, embracing your signature style, channeling your client's audience, and creating an online shop without inventory. What made you go freelance? What made you break away from that job and start your own business? What did you feel was missing in that specific container?
I think I always wanted to work for myself, mainly for the lifestyle that I want to lead. I want to be able to work when I want to work and not work when I don't want to work, and travel as much or as little as I want to. And that doesn't mean I'm traveling all the time, but I like the spontaneity. I feel like I'm living when I get to go do something randomly for fun that's impactful, that's meaningful, and it's just hard to do that when you have a corporate job, because the company's goals come first and the schedule is just not flexible. So I always had that on the horizon, as I want to get to there where I can pick my clients, I can pick my projects, and it's just slowly doing less of the work that I didn't want to do but I had to do for money, and more of the work that I want to do, until I was ready to leave that job, just saving up that money so I have a runway of 6 months to a year of bills covered so I could leave. But it was always the goal. Actually, before I took that job, I was freelancing. My journey was like a job for a little while, and then freelance for a little while, and then a job for a little while, and then freelance. And then sometimes the jobs would last like 2 or 3 years, and it would take up like a big chunk of my 20s. But it was always like, let's see how all those skills that I had, and how can I bring that into my business? And the jobs kept getting better, and so it became harder and harder to say no to like some of the full-time jobs that I was getting offered, and then also the freelance work. But those first few years were really hard, like getting jobs from Craigslist, trying to find work any way I could, really, like totally outside of my my main medium that I wanted to do. I was doing everything, like photography, video, whatever. Like, yeah.
So right after after finishing your education in graphic design, you started freelancing, or you took a job somewhere?
I had what they like to call here permalance. That permalance. So it's like freelance, but it's permanent, but it's not permanent because they can let you go anytime. So I had that for a little while at Viacom, at an MTV owned company within Viacom. Then I quit that job a few months later, went to Europe for 4 months, and then came back and started freelancing. That was the journey. Yeah. But I took on freelance work since 2010, as soon as I could get it. Yeah. And I was just doing it outside of classes and stuff. And that was really when my freelance work began, 2010. But then I made it officially a business in 2014.
And what were, how were those first months, after you left that corporate job and you decided to really give a shot to having your own creative studio and growing a business? What were those first months like?
I think going to Europe, I had an internship in Lithuania, totally random, right? I got it on Craigslist. I found an internship in Lithuania through Craigslist. That's actually a real story. And ended up doing it, living there. And I think I needed something different. I've always craved that experience of like living in different places around the world, getting unique experiences, making connections, and then bringing that into the work. So that was really important for me, that while I'm young, get as many of these experiences as I can, because that's going to inform how different my style is, or how different the way that I operate, the way that I talk to people and build relationships. I really resonated with certain people that I met over the years, but they weren't all in my city. They were around the world, and I needed those experiences. But when I got back, yeah, it was a struggle to keep it going. Like, try to balance the setting up of the business, which is a lot of work, people forget, just to get it going legally, and all the different considerations of how you do it in the United States. It's hard, it's overwhelming. And then starting to try and get clients, it wasn't really working in the beginning. It was just barely getting by, probably spending more money than I was making. But I wanted it so bad that I would just keep showing up, and that was right when Instagram was starting, so I had an outlet where I was getting that instant feedback on my work, and I could see it improving. So that was really helpful too. I don't know, it was very chaotic, but also really formative and fun too.
I wonder what were the first assignments where you started seeing results, like thinking like, hey, I can totally live from this. And also, like, what were your, those first tactics that you used that seemed to work in terms of getting client assignments? While doing the research for this episode, I was watching a video of yours where you spoke about certain tactics that you use to get mural assignments, right? Within Brooklyn or within your city. So you can take it in any direction, not specifically with mural assignments, but what are the things that you feel that you implemented in the very beginning that you feel worked very well in terms of getting assignments?
I think through working at agencies at that time, I was like, full-time job, freelance, full-time job, freelance. And sometimes it was an agency and sometimes it was a brand. And when I was at the agencies, I learned that you have to show the client what you can do before you do it so that they know what you're capable of. So mock-ups became a really powerful way for me to show people what I could do with murals or with products or packaging, whatever I wanted to make. And at that time, it was a lot of murals. So I would go walk around the city finding walls that I wanted to paint, just photograph the blank walls, and then use Photoshop or Procreate to mock up my murals. And then I would literally just walk into the business. I would show them what I made and see how they react. And I did that 50 to 100 times until people started saying yes. And I didn't always have a custom mock-up for them, but I had my work and I had a wall in mind, and sometimes it would take years for them to come back to me, but a lot of them ended up coming back. So the mock-up was really powerful. And then what else? My first couple projects that I had that made me feel comfortable keeping moving on this path were local restaurants. So first was a cafe. I did a chalk menu board and some artwork around the cafe. It was like coffee themed, so it was right up my alley. And I got to hand paint it and hand draw it, which was the first time someone really asked me to do that. All my previous freelance work was digital or logo design or whatever. So this was my first time like hand lettering, hand painting for a client. And then the next project, that was not very big budget. The next project I got was my first big budget project, like $10,000, first time getting that. And it was a restaurant branding, menu board, signage, everything. They wanted everything, and it took 4 months. So $10,000 for 4 months. I learned that that's not adequate, and I was very inexperienced at the time. But it was a great first big client project, and I liked that it was local. Both of those restaurants were within like 4 blocks of my apartment, so I could walk around and see people going in and interacting with the work and stuff. Yeah.
Here are the bios of all the guests featured in this episode. You will find a full list of the episodes on the show notes so that you can go ahead and listen on your favorite podcast platform or watch them on martinaflor.com/podcast. Matteo Bologna is the founder of Muka Design. His multidisciplinary background in architecture, graphic design, illustration, and typography facilitated his early business successes and inspired the decision to create a New York-based branding and design agency. As a creative director, he oversees and inspires every project with energy, intellect, and a quick wit. Matteo is also the principal of the new Muka Design spin-off type foundry, Muka Typo, and is frequently asked to lecture about branding and typography around the world. You can find him on at Muka Design with double C, Mucca Design on Instagram and online on mukadesign.com. Christina has a wide experience in publishing and she shares it all during this episode. She is the executive publishing director of art, food, and lifestyle publishing at renowned independent publisher Chronica Books. She is a professional collaborator and creator, bringing new ideas to fruition every season, as well as overseeing the publishing of more than 120 books and gift products every year. Eric, also known as EFDOT, is a colorblind visual artist and community builder based in Brooklyn, New York. Since finishing design school in 2012, EFDOT has cultivated an art practice and creative studio that spans across a variety of media. His specialties range from hand-painted murals to drawings on paper to animated trading cards, all tied together through his playful abstract style. He has created art for clients such as Nike, USA Skateboarding, Oakley, Chicago Cubs, Tops, and Adobe. So this is it. I hope you loved this episode. You can find me, the host of the show, on social networks at Martina Flor on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. If you have a question or comments, go to martinaflor.com/podcast, where you can see previous episodes, find show notes, and send voice memos with your comments and questions. You can also watch these episodes on YouTube. Just go to martinaflor.com/YouTube to find them. You can, of course, listen to all our episodes on your favorite podcast platform. If you loved this episode, subscribe to this podcast. And if you leave us a review, it will help others find us. Thank you all for listening and see you in the next episode of Martina Flor's Open Studio. Bye-bye.